Hi, Jeff Krushek. I'm a board member of the Pine Grove Zoo in Little Falls, and today we'd like to kind of talk a little bit about the zoo and different happenings and things that are going on, get you a little bit more informed on what's happening at the zoo. I'd like to introduce a few people. We have Vicki Villabro. Vicki's our marketing director. She does a great job for the zoo. If you see us on Facebook and social media and all that stuff, Vicki's the one that does that. Jerry Lochner. Jerry Lochner has been a board member at the zoo for a long time, and he's very instrumental in things that are happening at the zoo. And probably doesn't need an introduction, but Marnita Van Hoekie. And Marnita is our zoo director. And Marnita does an awesome job with the animals and with us on the board of directors at the zoo. So thank you, Marnita. And with that being said, we'll get started into our program. I'd like to start out just by talking a little bit about, I was born and raised in Little Falls, and growing up in Little Falls, I remember going to the zoo. And back then, 20 years ago, from what I remember, there was a couple black bears in small cages, maybe a tire swing or something hanging that they could play with, a couple wolves, and then there was a field with some bison in and maybe a deer or two, but that was really it with the zoo. A lot of things have changed in the last 20 years, to say the least. And today we'd like to recognize two people that we feel are driving forces in taking the zoo to the next level and where we are today. So Marnita Van Hoekie, who's our zoo director, and Jerry Lochner, who, Jerry, you actually hired Marnita when you were working for the city.
That's a few years ago, though.
That was a few years ago, yeah. And Jerry today, again, is a very active member in the zoo board. Together they have a vision for the zoo and a desire to create a sanctuary for the animals, just not putting animals in cages, but actually having a sanctuary for the animals and a very desirable place for them to live, and for our kids and our families and our grandkids to be able to come out and view the animals and see them in a natural environment. And it's just been very good for the community and for all of us. Adding new exhibits is one of the things that you guys really have a vision for, and adding new animals and adding new exhibits and stuff to the zoo. And this April, we'll be having our newest exhibit that Jerry and Marnita were instrumental in putting together, and I can't wait to show it to you guys because it's pretty cool, pretty awesome. And that's a North American river otter exhibit. This new addition to the zoo is going to bring lots of new people and life and new things going on at the zoo. And we'd like to thank our local contractors and business people, and you, those of you who attended last year's Zoo Gone Wild and gave generous donations to what they called water squirrels last year.
It was.
It was water school.
Yeah. So with that being said, Vicki, I'll hand it over to you if you want to ask a few questions.
Yeah, I will. Jerry, we know you have been instrumental in implementing changes at Pine Grove Zoo over the last 20 years. In your opinion, what has been the most influential change?
Well, that's a multifaceted question. First of all, I think you need to go a little bit back further. Actually, in the mid-'80s, the city went through a major finance crunch. It was the only time that I remember actually laying people off. But the zoo was a big point of discussion. Do we want to keep the zoo? And more importantly, do we want to go from a drive-by zoo, talking about the little cages that you remember and I remember, to a zoo that is more modern in a sense, safer for the animals, safer for the workers, and better for the public. That decision that the park board made back in the mid-'80s, and the council went along with that first decision all right, we're going to do that. We're going to go from this drive-by zoo to a more modern, better zoo, which is, and has turned out to be much, much better, not only for the employees and the public, but for the animals. You don't have these little cages anymore. So then, as we're going through that process, that's the first big change. The second big change is when the Friends of Pine Grove took over the zoo. And again, that is maybe 20 years ago?
2004.
2004, not quite, 15 years ago. The Friends of the Zoo took over the zoo, and Marnita was hired as the zoo director. When that happened, the professionalism, the care for the animals, and the zoo itself took a big jump up. Yes, we had the zoo for many, many years, but it wasn't a zoo that was meeting the AZA standards, and it was, what we had was good. We took care of the animals well as best as we could, but having the Friends of Pine Grove Zoo and the agreement that was made between the city and the Friends of the Pine Grove Zoo brought us up another level. So now you have not only better records, but better care for the animals. You have better standards that are met for taking care of those animals, and it's safer for the public. Now, in between all of that, we made the exhibits. Not only in the mid-'80s, when we came up with a draft of what we wanted the zoo to look like, that the zoo board and the council went along with, we brought dirt into the center of the zoo. And if you remember back when those little single cages were there, the zoo was flat. There was no mound of dirt in there. So we took the dirt from all the street projects over the years and built that island, in a sense, in the center. We moved the hoof stock off to the side so the trucks could go in and out freely. But in the mid-'80s, we started building that mound of dirt. It wasn't until later that we actually started building the exhibits, when we got more money and
Sure.
finances became available. So those two things, I talk too much, but
You're
those
fine.
two things I think are the biggest improvements at the zoo. Going to a zoo that we have the style of zoo today that's better for the animals and the public and the workers, and then having the Friends of Pine Grove Zoo take over. Marnita and staff brought that professionalism, that care for the animals, that taking and greeting the public and having events and making the zoo what it is today is because of the Friends of the Zoo and the staff that are there to make that happen.
Jerry, going back a little bit, I remember a story that when you hired Marnita, that Marnita accepted the job, but after a while you were not excited. You were thinking about moving on. Can you share that story a little bit with us?
Yeah, actually, I think when I first started, I was just part-time at the time. And I talked with Jerry, and I've been really blessed to have been able to have him as my mentor all these years. And it wasn't to the capacity I wanted. It wasn't, I wanted something different. I wanted to see the community enjoy it more and be more involved. And I was going to move on. I actually had a job offer at another zoo in South Dakota, and which is closer to my hometown. And you know what? I just felt there was something here, though. I wasn't ready to give up, and so I chatted with Jerry, and we've been really lucky. You know, the park board was a big part of it. I was hired before the Friends took over. I was a city employee at the time.
Yeah.
And then the Friends of the Zoo took over, and I think it's been a great partnership all these years with the city and the Friends of the Zoo, and
Yeah,
definitely.
I think you're being a little modest on that. The story I remember is that Marnita, being so attached to the animals and just loving what she does, when she came on board, she didn't feel the nutritional end of
That's
it
true.
was where it should be.
That's
And at the time, I believe that, you know, the Bears were getting day-old donuts and maybe some pizza, or whatever the city could do or whatever the zoo could do. And Marnita's like, yeah, I don't think that that's a good thing. And so you had talked to Jerry about changing some of those things.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, Dr. Orr
Yeah.
was very influential
Yeah.
in doing that, and he was one of the ones that said, hey, you should get involved, and he has been great over the years and helping out and, you know, helping making those changes. And you're right, they were really too heavy, you know, and so they weren't active, and the areas they had to live wasn't really conducive to being able to move and exercise much. But we did change diets almost immediately,
Yeah.
and made a big difference. You know, we all know that healthy living, you know, requires the food that's going in and out. So, yeah, we did do a lot of changing. We did a lot of changing with records and everything, almost immediately, just to try to bring it up to a more elite zoo.
Yeah.
It takes time and money always, but I think from the get-go we really wanted to see it change.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's a vision between you and Jerry. I mean, you went to Jerry and said, this is what I need, and Jerry supported your
Absolutely.
decision. So,
And
thank you
I
both.
couldn't have done that without him either. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you have to have people that support you. You can have all the ideas in the world, but if you don't have the people behind you saying yes to that, it doesn't help either.
Yep.
So it definitely it's been a team effort, I think, and with a lot of people. But I've been very fortunate to have Jerry as a mentor. And in the zoo world, he had a really positive, people just loved him, and I think that helped
You're
me
being
a
a little
lot.
too kind now.
No, I mean
No.
it. I actually mean it, absolutely.
But when you look back at the changes we made, and I like the bears as an example, and you can go far and wide across America, and if you can find another bear exhibit with grass in, let me know,
Yeah.
because there isn't. We have exhibits that are big enough to maintain an area that has grass and water, and still have dens and winter quarters and feeding. But as we've developed the zoo over the years, and that's part of the whole plan. You know, we don't want just a zoo with 12 by 24 pens or small areas. We want to have the grass and the rocks. And I think you're going to see that with the otters. We don't just have a little otter exhibit. We went to a lot of zoos before we decided what we're going to do here.
Yeah.
And that makes it, staff helps. How do we make it safe? How do we make it, it has to be able to maintain it when we're done, and yet have an exhibit that will be functional for the animals, but nice for us to see too.
I think that's what helps too is, I worked in the veterinary field for 16 years before I started at the zoo. And so I kind of had the animal piece and Jerry had this other piece. And so it's really been nice. And we've been able, the nice thing, I think we've had a mutual respect. And so it's worked really well over the years. I'd say, okay, I don't know anything about elevations and plumbing, and sewer and all of this stuff, but I know that the otter won't do that, and it's worked really well, and then you bring in, we've got a phenomenal staff, and then they come in and they want to do training or whatever, and it really works great, It's
a partnership.
It really does. It's everybody having some say.
So getting back to the bears, so Yogi, he was one of the original bears that was in
Yogi
the
and
drive-by zoo.
Yep.
Yep, Yogi and Teddy, yep.
Okay, and Yogi just passed.
Yep, he just passed. He's old bear, very old
old.
bear. And he, bears in captivity tend to live longer, and most species do because they don't have the wears and tears of the daily stress of living in the wild. But he did just pass away. But you know what? One of the coolest things is when we put those bears in the grass that they hadn't been in, they actually touched the grass with their paw and looked at their paw like there was something wrong. And man, it made all of the work worth it.
Yeah.
And they went out and they rolled and ate, and they were green. I mean, they were just covered. They're so happy to be out there. It was just amazing to
I just
see.
thought it was amazing that I remember as a kid seeing the bears that were in those little pens, slapping that tire around. And then when I was on the board of directors, that's the same bear. 20 some years later is still at the zoo, and so he lived a long, healthy.
Wow.
One of the reasons Jerry mentioned too, we wanted to get him in more natural habitats and things like that. And one of the things that happened is when they had the public had access to them, the perimeter fence was only 4 feet from the actual front of the area where the bears were. Some people aren't very polite, and they would throw things in with the bears and get them sick and things like that. And so, people will ask over the years, why'd you put up a dog-eared fence? It was for the safety of the animals. It was so that
People.
they didn't do that anymore. Because I'd find, bottle rockets in there and change and suckers. And I think some people are not very nice, and some people try to be nice by giving them something to eat, but realizing suckers and with sticks on them isn't probably the best thing for a bear. But overall, people have been fantastic, but there needs to be changes along the way.
Yeah. One thing I want to say about how you guys work together too, and this always brings a smile to our face when we talk about it, when you guys were out doing the otter exhibit, I'd go check on them once in a while, and it was kind of funny because neither one of them would be talking, but yet they knew what each other was doing. They'd just be staring. They would just be observing and checking things out, and they knew, what each other one was thinking, and it was just hilarious how many times I'd go out there and there'd be complete silence. They'd come back and the problem would be solved.
And
so-
we'd be like, yeah, I think that's a great idea. And
Well, we also realized that, hey, we can change this and make this better.
Yes.
And we had talked about it earlier. So you go out to see it, hey, that is it, you're right, we need to change
Right.
this feature or that feature as we were building it, so to say. And so we'd make those changes, and yeah, this will work or that won't work.
Well, and I think that-
sometimes you didn't have to talk, but it happened. It happened anyway.
I think that's a great point, though. We've never been to a point where if I had an idea or you had an idea or someone else had an idea, we just shut it down. It was like, okay, you have a different perspective. Let's look at that. Maybe that's, and we'll take a little this, a little this. That's how it all works.
Oh, heck yeah.
You know, nobody knows everything. And so getting different perspectives, and I think that's what's been great is the respect is there and everybody wants the same thing, which is to make it the best so it can be. So it's worked really great. Staff is the same way. We all have input, and the best results is a little of everybody's, you know, because that's I think what makes it.
Yeah.
You don't always look at things like you said, Jeff. You wouldn't have thought that. So
Right.
I think that's what's unique and amazing about what we've got.
Yep.
Marnita, what do you think has been your biggest challenge over the last 20 years?
When I started at the zoo, you know, it's interesting because people had pretty strong feelings about the zoo, and one way or another. And I would call and say, "Hi, this is Marnie from Pine Grove Zoo," and they'd hang up on me. And over the years, I think the challenge has been getting our local people out there to realize, hey, it has changed. You know, we still have some people say, "Oh, I haven't been there in 25 years," and they don't realize how awesome it is.
That surprises me too, when, you know, family or friends and you're saying, you know, you're talking about life and I'm on the zoo and, you know, this happened to the zebra or we're getting a new otter or whatever, and, you know, do they still have those bears in the cages? And it's like, no, they don't, and you really need to come. And
Right.
it surprises me how many people that live in Little Falls or the surrounding area that haven't been to the zoo.
Right.
But yet we get people from, we have a map in the gift store with pins across the United States, and we get people from all over the world coming to the zoo, but somebody that lives on Southwest Little Falls might not have been there in 20 years. So
And don't you feel that's probably no? I mean, I think we aren't real good as people doing things that's in our own backyard. You know, we always think we got to drive somewhere to have this amazing experience. I would say more and more, it's getting much better. But that's probably been the biggest challenge is making people realize, hey, it's different. It's come on over and take a look, and they could be 3 blocks away and they don't realize it. You know.
Well, and I think too, again, with you and Jerry being instrumental in the exhibits and the new animals that are coming in, where's the closest otter exhibit in a zoo that you're aware of? Is there one in the state?
Oh yeah, the Minnesota Zoo.
Minnesota
And
has
yep.
Watertown.
Yep, Watertown,
But that's
South
out of state.
Dakota.
Yeah.
And back to that, Jeff, about getting the word out. I think bringing Vicki on board with the Facebook and the website, I think has made a monster difference because we all know the media's changed now. They don't read newspapers like they used to, and they don't listen to radio like they used to. But Facebook is a huge thing, and you're phenomenal at that, Vicki. You do an amazing job, and I think that's one of those things that you have to do. I think it reaches people we'd never be able to reach otherwise.
agree.
I think you're being a little modest. Not that Vicki doesn't do an awesome job with that, but you're giving people reason to come to this zoo. You know, like with the tigers that we got, and not just getting 2 orange tigers. You have a white tiger and a orange tiger, and the kangaroos have been a big hit. And just the things you're doing with the kangaroos now, we just don't have kangaroos in. You look at them and they're 50 yards away. I mean, people can come and they can pet them, and you'll explain to them, you know, what the habitat is and what they like and what they don't like. And so it's a very hands-on, not such a cold place to go to when you're visiting.
I think you probably touched on something, Jeff, that I think we pride ourselves on is that we really love these animals like our own.
Yeah.
And they age in place. It isn't like, oh, that kangaroo's getting old, we'll get rid of that one, get in a new one. These animals mean something to us. And so we do operant training with them, we do enrichment with them, but we know these animals extremely well. And this is their home. We're not going to ship them off because they're getting old. We're not going to do that. This is we call it age in place. This is where they're going to be. And the kangaroos, certainly, we've had some adventures over the years with the different animals, but the kangaroos is very
The
interesting.
kangaroos went home with you every night while they were
They
babies.
lived at my house for 6 months, yes. So you'd be making
did.
supper and a kangaroo would go hopping by. And they actually I had a kangaroo room in the house.
It was
So
a roo room.
It was the roo room, yeah. And then they came to the zoo, and it's working into desensitizing them and things like that to what they're going to have. And now they're very happy where they are. But
I remember one of the first board meetings I went to, and we were in the clubhouse behind, and behind the clubhouse is where the wolves' den is, and then you have the tigers and all that around there. And I came in, and Marnita, you weren't there yet. And we were all sitting inside, and all of a sudden we could hear the wolves howl. And we all kind of looked at each other and said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Marnita's here." They do that every morning when Marnita
Yeah.
comes because they want to see you. You know, and that just really, I mean, that really stuck with me, that the animals, I mean, they know you. They know the sound of your vehicle. They're happy when you're there.
yeah, you know, again, you know, I just have a very strong passion for the animals, and I think we hire the same type of people at the zoo. They all have that passion, and you know, they aren't just a wolf. You know, you can do things with them that others just can't. So we're very lucky, and we really maintain that because it makes their lives happier. When Bella's pacing, it isn't because she's unhappy, it's because she wants me to come in and play with her, you know, and she's trying to get my attention by jumping up and doing all these little fun, cute little things, you know. But I've been very honored to be a part of a lot of their lives, you know, from a young age.
Great.
Jerry, what excites you most about Pine Grove Zoo?
Well, first of all, I think it's a blessing. When the land was deeded to the city many, many years ago, the original pine forest, that's still there, and the shelter building, there was a walking system, but moving the zoo to a more modern zoo is good. What excites me the most, though, and this is funny, and we're blessed with good animals and good people, but when you watch the public come in and they see an animal for the first time, or they can be a part of the opera training and kind of get a behind-the-scenes look, and their eyes get about this big, or the first time they're right up to the glass and the bear comes up to the glass. We're going to have that same experience when the otters come. I think people are just going to love the fact that you're going to be right up against that otter. It's an acrylic glass. But watching the people is what excites me. Yeah, animals are well taken care of, and they're fed, and they're weighed, and their diets are kept track of, and the people get to work with them every day, but it's fun watching the people.
I always, why I like being on the zoos because I like animals and I like learning about all this. And one thing that I've learned with being on the board is that the animal, different personalities, and when we're going through the board minutes, one of the items that we go through is you talk about animal updates. And so the yak, you know, so we have a yak, and the yak doesn't like guys,
True.
likes girls.
Yes.
So if you have somebody fixing the fence,
Yes.
and it's a guy fixing the fence, you know, Marnita or one of the other ladies needs to be out by the
Yep.
yak to make him feel better, and it's just interesting as you go through all that, and that they all have personalities, and the wolves howl when you come in and all that. I just find that very cool.
So why don't you explain why Tukey, our son Conyer, is no longer in the employee area?
Well, we got a sun conure, and I've not
What's
been.
that?
It's oh gosh.
It's
a bird.
Very colorful.
Okay.
Very colorful bird. Looks like for lack of going into it, more like a bigger parakeet.
Okay.
They don't talk, but they do mimic. And so what we didn't realize is she started to mimic my laugh. And so we had her habitat in the employee area, but every time the phone rang and I would laugh, she would laugh, and pretty soon she was laughing all the time, and so you couldn't even hear yourself on the phone. She'd like, you know, and I didn't think I sounded like that, but that was her version of it anyway. And so we had to move her because we couldn't hear anything. You know, she'd talk, and laugh, and so we had to move her out of that area because we could. And so now we could take her to Craigan's, and it's so cute because she'll do that laugh every once in a while. And I'm like, man, it's been a while since she's been in there, but she still remembers that.
So we've been mentioning and talking about the otter exhibit. So why don't you guys give a little more details about this awesome exhibit that's going to be premiering in April?
Well, I think it's going to be very, very neat. Marnita will talk a little bit maybe about the basement area. Inside the otter exhibit itself, there's a grass area and there's a pool area. The otters will be able to go from the water up and over some rocks and into the grass and back and forth. Within the pool area, when you go to other zoos, they might be able to swim 10, 15 feet this way or that way. Our pool exhibit is 52 feet in length. So we have a lot more water. We have all natural rock behind that we put in. We also have a staircase in there for the employees to get down. It also has to have a recycling program. The water that's brought in has to be filtered, so it goes in one set of pipes and comes out through another set of pipes. That's part of it. When you get to the grass area, again, more natural settings. When you first come in the spring, we won't have all the grass there. That's going to take a little bit of time, but you'll be able to see that there's drains and the ability for the otters to go back and forth will be one of a kind and unique. We'll have grass over here and a pool over here, but it's going to be of a size that is appropriate for two otters.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to expand on that because
Yep.
we also do have underwater viewing. It's a 10-foot long glass tunnel that kids and adults can fit. We've already had adults go through there. And the otters can swim right up to them.
And over.
And over them. So that's going to be very unique. I think we're going to have a lot of people in there. There was some, retrofitting with this exhibit over the last, we started about 2.5 years ago talking about it. And as with every exhibit, you run into, oh darn it, we never thought of that. And so you kind of rearrange that. So I think it's been unique. We brought in some huge rocks, some boulders from out in the bison exhibit into the, we call it like the bank, the river bank. Then our second dilemma was, so the animals need to be in a holding area or a den area, which was 1 story below the ground. So how do you get them down there? And so we built an otter ramp. There isn't any zoo that has an otter ramp, so you couldn't take it and then kind of fit it to what we had to do. And so again, it was just, okay, how do you come up with this stuff? And we built this otter ramp. It's quite unique.
It's neat. It's good.
But I think it's going to be very functional and very neat. We have a trainer that flies in from Las Vegas that trains our keepers on how to do the training for the animals when our animals go to school. And she was just here last week, and she looked at it and she's like, "Well, I cannot wait to see this." And so, but it's everything's down there. We were able to retrofit the building to what the otters needed. And believe it or not, when we built the building, it'd be 13 years ago now, we knew we were going to have otters in there. And so we already had holes through the concrete wall because we knew at some point we were going to do otters down there. So we kind of try to plan ahead with what we think we're going to need in hopes to not have to, do too much remodeling. It's going to be amazing.
Well, thank you guys. In closing, Jerry, we're very fortunate that you were a city administrator for a number of years. The city of Little Falls is very fortunate when you had that role, and we appreciate you, everything you've done for the zoo, and
My
being
pleasure.
on the board and
honor.
everything that you've done to support Marnita. So we couldn't have done it without you, Jerry. You've been great. Marnita, again, thank you for everything you do for the zoo. Thank you for being so kind and everything that you are to the animals. I mean, it shows. It feels good because they are at home there.